Welcome to When a Killer Calls, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Courtney, aka Crime with Kourt. The story I have for you today is one that will literally have you screaming at me through your phones, or wherever you may be listening to this. A young mom disappears after a violent argument with her husband. Said husband tries to kill the lead investigator on the case. A Jane Doe found in a different state with striking similarities. And a daughter who has never given up hope on trying to find her mother. This is the disappearance of Patricia Lee Otto, and joining us later is her very own daughter. If you haven't noticed, my setup is a little bit different and I haven't posted in forever. Some of you might be watching this on YouTube while others may be listening to this as a podcast. Regardless of how you're watching, thank you for being here. I'll have new episodes every Friday available on YouTube and Spotify, so be on the lookout. With that being said, let's get into it. The story begins on the evening of August 31st, 1976. 24-year-old Patricia Otto, who liked to go by Patty, had an evening class that she was attending in Lewiston, Idaho. Before her class started, she took her two young daughters, Suzanne and Natalie, who were 3 and 5 at the time, to her parents' house so that they could babysit. Her husband, Ralph, was at home alone, so he technically could have watched the girls, but Patty didn't trust him alone with them. To give a little backstory, Ralph was 18 years older than Patty. They met when she was 16 years old, and Ralph was 34. At the time, Ralph was looking for a babysitter for his then-girlfriend's kids, but once he met Patty, he became infatuated with her. By the time she turned 18, he had broken up with his ex and proposed to Patty, which was followed by marriage and 2 kids. But Ralph, by all means, was not a good person. He struggled with alcoholism and was extremely controlling and abusive towards his family. By the spring of 1976, things were so bad at home that Patty actually filed for a divorce and moved out with the kids. But in a way to win her back, Ralph checked into rehab, and she eventually went back home to help take care of him. But he truly didn't change, and he continued drinking. So taking it back to that night, August 31st, 1976, Patty took the kids to her parents' house to attend her class. The class took longer than usual that night, which angered Ralph and led him to believe that she was out with another man. But after the class was over, Patty took the girls home, tucked them into bed in the basement, and went upstairs. So one thing that I wanted to point out was that the girls' bedrooms were not in the basement. It's kind of assumed that Patty put them to bed downstairs because she probably thought a fight was about to take place. A little while later, their 3-year-old daughter Suzanne was woken up to the sound of her parents arguing, so she got up out of bed and crept up the stairs to see what was going on. And what she saw next would stay with her forever. I got the chance to talk to Suzanne, so I'll insert the clip of her telling us what she saw that night in her own words. But be warned, it is not easy to hear.
As soon as they were put us to bed downstairs, there was fighting, loud sounds upstairs, and could hear like crashing noises and voices. And I snuck back up the stairs to go check on my mom. Obviously a curious 3-year-old, and I wanted to know what was happening. And there's wrought iron railing that goes like around our stairs, and I saw them hit each other in the face, like slapping each other in the face. And then my father grabbed her by the throat, or by the front of her throat, and pushed her up against the wall, and he drug her out of my sight. And what I believe he put her in his bedroom or into the kitchen, but I just know she went out of my sight. And then I was scared. I didn't go to her. I didn't run. I didn't, scream what was happening. I just ran back downstairs to my sister and told her I was scared. And that's the only memory that I have of her. And that memory played over and over again. And I was told it was a bad dream.
So she saw her dad strangling her mom. The last thing she saw was her mom wearing red pants and a white shirt being pushed up against the wall and dragged out of sight. And I really want you to remember the description of her clothes because this is very important to the story later. This scared Suzanne so bad that she ran back downstairs and woke her sister up to tell her what happened. But this was the last time that Suzanne, or really anybody, saw Patty. The next morning, the girls woke up and repeatedly asked their dad where mom was, and all Ralph could say was that she left. She abandoned them. And he would continue telling everyone that, even the police, when Patty was officially reported missing by her sister a few days later. The Lewiston police launched an investigation into the disappearance of Patty, but by the time they got around to searching the Otto family home, there was no evidence of foul play that they could find. So Ralph was an independent contractor, meaning he was his own boss. He didn't have any coworkers, and he didn't have anyone to report to. After Patty disappeared, he dropped the kids off with their aunt, and after that, he could have gone anywhere. During the search, authorities found that Patty left behind all of her personal belongings, including her car and her wedding ring, which she was known to never take off. But her wedding ring wasn't just randomly found in the house. It was found in Ralph's coat pocket, and shortly after, it was lost. But most importantly, Patty left behind her kids, and that's something that she would have never done on her own free will, despite Ralph's claims. Ralph was adamant that she was having an affair, so his story would change over time until he finally settled on the story that Patty left with another man. But there's absolutely no evidence of this. It's like she vanished into thin air. But this is where the story takes a drastic turn. A few months into Patty's disappearance, Ralph became extremely annoyed with the Lewiston Police Department. He reportedly felt like he was being harassed by them, but his wife was literally missing. Any normal person that didn't have anything to do with it would probably not feel that way. But it was at this point that Ralph began going to a local bar, and he started complaining to his friends there and the bartender about this supposed harassment. He told them that he would like to, quote, get rid of Captain Ayler, which was the lead investigator on the case. The bartender reportedly told Ralph that if he ever wanted to get rid of someone, that he knows people. So Ralph took him up on that offer, and he hired a contract killer to murder the lead investigator in his wife's disappearance. And if that doesn't scream guilty, then I don't know what does. But there would be a major plot twist that he did not see coming. The contract killer that Ralph hired was not only not a contract killer, but he was actually an undercover police officer. It's literally insane. So because of this, Ralph was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to 5 years in prison. After he went to jail, his 2 young daughters went to live with their aunt and uncle and tried to resume a normal life, but the disappearance of their mom was always on the back of their minds. With no clues as to what happened to Patty other than that horrific sighting of that violent argument, her case would soon go cold. Suzanne and her sister believed for years that their mom left them willingly because that's all Ralph pounded into their heads. But they never gave up hope that one day they would see their mom walk through the door again. But unfortunately, that day has yet to come. Fast forward to August 27, 1978, 2 years after Patty's disappearance. A group of hunters, including a father and son duo, were out elk hunting in the remote woods near Elgin, Oregon, around the Finley Creek cow camp to be exact. But their day definitely did not go as planned because they stumbled upon something straight out of a nightmare. There in a shallow grave was a human skull. Eventually, the Oregon State Police were called in and they found other remains, including a white top, red pants, and pieces of nylon cord. Initially, and I'm talking very briefly, it was suspected that the remains belonged to a 76-year-old woman who disappeared a year prior only 8 miles away. And because of that, the media didn't really follow up or report on anything after this. But the remains were not that 76-year-old woman. In fact, her body would be found a year later. Instead, they belonged to a woman between the ages of 17 and 25 years old with blonde or light brown hair. She was around 125 pounds in life and approximately 5 to 5'4" tall, but that's not all that authorities found. They also discovered that the woman, who became known as the Finley Creek Jane Doe, was pregnant at the time she died. At this point in time, Ralph was still serving his time in prison, but Patty's parents got word of the Finley Creek Jane Doe and decided to send in her dental records to the Oregon police for comparison. But just one day before sending in those records, another woman's body would be found in the woods near Portland, Oregon. Once the Oregon State Police received Patty's dental records, they immediately said that the two were not a match. But what they didn't realize was that they accidentally compared Patty's dental records to the body found near Portland. not the Finley Creek Jane Doe. And this mistake would go unnoticed for decades. Because the media never reported that the Finley Creek Jane Doe was in fact not the 76-year-old woman, the police never made the connection between her and Patty. And once again, Patty's case would go cold. Just 4 years into Ralph's sentence of attempted murder, he would be released on a technicality. On September 8th, 1983, he died of a heart attack. He was never charged in his wife's disappearance, and he took whatever secrets he had with him to his grave. Suzanne and Natalie would grow up without both of their parents, but the mystery of what happened to their mom never left them. Natalie dedicated her life to finding out the truth, but sadly, in May of 2006, she, along with her husband and son, all died in a tragic accident. She never got to find out what truly happened to her mom. After Natalie passed away, Suzanne made it her mission to honor her sister and take over the investigation into Patty's disappearance. She's uncovered a lot of information not previously known, including a letter written by Ralph before he died, where he pretty much incriminated himself. The letter read, quote, "I might very well be insane, to where I should be put away," end quote. There would be no updates in their mom's case until 2021 when Suzanne was scrolling through Facebook and stumbled across the composite sketch of the Finley Creek Jane Doe. When I asked her what it was like finding that composite sketch that night, this is what Suzanne said.
I'll replay it for you. This is literally like 10 o'clock at night, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm scrolling through my Facebook and I see that image and I'm like, weird. Somebody drew me. That's really weird. And I look to see if my husband's awake, like somebody drew me. Somebody really drew me. And then I click on it and it describes a short Caucasian blonde female found in 1978, which is 2 years after my mother disappeared. Then I'm like, what the? Wearing red pants and a white blouse. And they draw my face and I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. This is the red pants doe that we know as a child. When I was 5 years old, we were told Grandma and Grandpa are going to Oregon and they think they found your mom.
If you're listening to this as a podcast, you won't be able to see what I'm talking about, but you need to stop what you're doing and Google this image. It's literally the spitting image of Suzanne and even Patty. After seeing the resemblance between her and the Finley Creek Jane Doe, she decided to research more about her, and what she found is absolutely mind-blowing. There were so many similarities between the Finley Creek Jane Doe and Patty. Jane Doe was found with red pants and a white shirt, which, if you remember, is exactly what Patty was wearing the night she disappeared. They shared the same characteristics, right down to the teeth lining up in images. The only thing that was different was that the Finley Creek Jane Doe was pregnant when she was murdered. This has left Suzanne wondering if her mom was pregnant at the time she disappeared. I mean, Ralph was pretty adamant that she was having an affair, so if she told him that she was pregnant with another man's baby that night, that could have been the reason for that violent argument, and in turn, that could be the reason she disappeared. When asked if she believes if the Finley Creek Jane Doe is her mom, this is what Suzanne has to say.
I've given the 99.9% statistic because I say, prove me wrong. I feel like she's handing me the answers. And I don't even know if I need Oregon to say, you know what, you're right. Oops, we messed up. We lost your mom. Because I'm so convinced by the dental work, the clothing, the descriptions, the forensic image that prove me wrong. I give you that 0.01% chance that it's somebody else, but how can it be anybody else? How can it be?
To kind of put it in perspective, Finley Creek is about 3 hours away from Lewiston, Idaho, where Patty disappeared. And when I asked Suzanne if Ralph had any connection to Oregon, she made a pretty good point.
The day after she disappeared, he brought us up and said he was going to go look for her. But then as far as what my father did or his time frame, he was an independent contractor. He owned his own business. I mean, he could have been gone for 6 days. He would travel as far as Montana, which was more than 8 hours away from our home. Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and he would get contracts with forest services. He would clear roads. He would dig culverts. He would create new land sites. You know, he had this access to rural areas, as well as the knowledge that those rural areas are very discreet. That he would spend weeks at a job site and he knows that, man, there's never any cars that come around here.
Suzanne strongly believes that the Finley Creek Jane Doe is her mom, but sadly, there's a chance that she might not ever find out for sure. The Oregon State Police closed Finley Creek Jane Doe's case in 1990, even though it was an unsolved homicide, and they sent her remains to a lab in Walla Walla, Washington to be cremated. They also destroyed her clothing. And to make matters worse, the cremains were never returned, and they have since been deemed lost. So there is a chance that the cremains are in an unmarked box at the Blue Mountain Funeral Home in Walla Walla, but all of the paperwork has been destroyed, so we just don't know for sure. So, because all of the evidence was destroyed, even though it was an unsolved homicide, there is now no body to compare. All hope is not lost, though. The Finley Creek Jane Doe had some remains that were never found, including both of her hands, an arm, and a pelvic bone. They could very well still be out there somewhere, and if that's the case, there's a chance that DNA can still be extracted and compared to Patty's. Over the past 2 years, there have been searches around where the Jane Doe was found, and cadaver dogs were able to pick up a scent near the gravesite. So it's hopeful that it's only a matter of time before the rest of her remains are found, so that she and Patty can get the justice they deserve. There's still one more twist in this case, though. When Suzanne was researching the Finley Creek Jane Doe, she came across a couple of old newspaper clippings detailing what happened the day she was found. So she started reading through it and found the names of the hunters who found her that day, the father and son duo. And to her surprise, she knew them, and extremely well for that matter. The hunter who found the body that day is now Suzanne's father-in-law, Rob. Rob was out hunting with his father, Lee, that day. Suzanne's husband and the rest of the family knew about Patty's disappearance, but they never linked the two together because, like I mentioned earlier, they all thought the remains belonged to a 76-year-old woman. And it was never really talked about again. They figured the case was closed, and that was that. After bringing this up to Rob, he remembered everything and even took Suzanne back to the gravesite by memory. The coincidences in this case are just insane. Suzanne likes to think that she met and married into this family for a reason and that Patty is slowly solving her own case. As of today, Patty is still technically considered missing under suspicious circumstances, but authorities believe she was murdered and they paint Ralph as the prime suspect. There's no doubt in Suzanne's mind that the Finley Creek Jane Doe is her mom, and she'll never stop fighting to figure out the truth. I have a picture of, I don't know if these are the Jane Doe's x-rays or if these are Patty's.
That's my mom. That's my mom's x-ray.
Okay. Yeah, I think that is kind of what sealed the deal for me. Just lining everything up.
Like laying it over the top of the autopsy photos, and it's like one by one by one, the teeth are the same. And I'm like, come on.
Yeah. Okay.
Come on. Okay, I can see that forensic images are not usually very, used as an identification purpose. It may bring somebody like, oh, could it be so-and-so? But generally they don't say, oh, that's definitely Patricia Otto from the forensic image. Yeah. But when you take the teeth, top and lowers, those are unique. Look at her bottoms. They rotate in exactly like mine do. Rotate in, go back out. Every tooth, just like the Finley Creek, is exactly the same. And then the tops are all nice and straight and perfect, but those lowers are very crowded from the wisdom teeth pushing them in.
And that's so specific. I asked Suzanne what we as supporters can do to help, and this is what she said.
We have done searches out there, but we've been very limited, like letting people come, because we're thinking this evidence is so 45 years old and I don't want somebody to destroy it. But we haven't actually had like a real grid search of the area. I mean, a pelvic bone is a big bone. Where's that pelvic bone? Yeah. That's somewhere. Even if a wolf drug it off, it could be a mile away, but it's not going to eat that pelvic bone. We can do searches. The other thing that we're asking for viewers to do is that there's an expert out there who knows how to use superimposition with those terrible photos that we have that can say, you know what? You can take Patty's eyes and line up pupil to pupil, and you can take the distance between her nose and her mouth and the jaw, and you can do all these things. And these are experts who do these things. And they could give a comparison to say, this person matches this skull perfectly. Where are those people? Why doesn't Oregon have somebody that can be doing this? Because Oregon's so dead set on, there's no way it's Patty. We ruled her out in 1978, and the dental records don't match, so it's not her. And I'm like, it's convenient that you say that because you're the ones that lost her body and closed in an unsolved homicide. I know why you're not going to give me closure. Yep. Admitting that this is my mother is admitting that every family that has a rule out is going to say, what about my mom? What about my sister? What about my son? You told me that body wasn't my child, and now I know you're not always right. Now I know the national database is not always right. It would cause a major upheaval of the system. So there's other things I want. I want the national database like NamUs and NCIC to do a major overhaul of their system and say, if you don't have proof of the record that you're claiming, which right now they claim my mother has no wisdom teeth, and I say, show me the record. They have no x-ray. They have nothing. They don't even have a dental record from her dentist. And I say, I have an x-ray and it shows that she has all four. Well, can we have that? Sure, I'll happily give it to them. They still won't update her record. It still shows she has none. And you just had it in your hand. You can see four. In that x-ray, there are four wisdom teeth. I can also ask that if forensic dentists look at that and tell me which one of those wisdom teeth is problematic because the Finley Creek Jane Doe is missing one. Why does Oregon not take that as, that's another piece of evidence, that's scientific. And then the other thing that we ask for is that viewers can do what the Finley Creek Task Force did for this case, which is they looked at the Doe network in their area and said, is there a case here locally that I can look into? You may not be the perfect person to do an investigation, but you can share a post by going click. And by going click, someone got that feed into my news feed. When you do those things, when you share those images and you share stories like yours and you get them out there, that one person that may be holding the missing piece could say, I have some information that may help.
Like Suzanne said, social media is so important, so please share this wherever you can. All it takes is one piece of the puzzle. I asked Suzanne a lot of questions, but this is probably the most important one. I asked her what she wants the listeners to know about her mom, and this was her answer.
That she never left me. I think it's so important that listeners know there's such two sides to every story. There's actually more than two sides to every story, but that if you just believe what you read in the newspapers or if you just believe what you're reading in the media, you may never really know who that real person was. But it sounds like my mother, all she ever wanted was to be a mother. And the reason she was getting a college degree was so she could leave my father and go raise us on her own. She wanted full custody. When she filed for the divorce, she wanted full custody. She never left us. I'm not an abandoned child like I was told my whole life. And that she was an incredible person and a fun person to be around, and she deserves more than what Oregon has done to her.
If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Patricia Otto, please do the right thing and contact the Lewiston Police Department at 208-746-0171. This is a case that I will forever think about, and I want to thank Suzanne for coming on and talking to us. But that is all for today. I'll see you guys next Friday, but until then, stay safe.